They ruled out the brain tumor that night, thank goodness. But then they said, please stay in for another 5 days and we can give you an MRI scan. So that's what happened. I had an MRI scan and it came back with demyelination. So that's the first I heard of multiple sclerosis being in my life. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, finish my PhD with MS fatigue. I had to extend by 6 months in order to get it done. It was like running across a bridge that's collapsing underneath you. It's just like being hit by a juggernaut every single day, and it doesn't get any better. There's so many ways in which it impacts your life and so many symptoms, physical, cognitive, psychological, that come into play. I should really have a neurologist since I do have multiple sclerosis. I went and then he started pushing further pharmaceutical. Actually, it was chemotherapy. He wanted me to start chemotherapy in tablet form. I would say that's been part of my health journey. But it's, as I say, it's the carnivore diet that was the most shocking.
Hello, everyone. Adam with Carnivore today. Today, we have a very special guest on the podcast, Rebecca Johnson. So, Rebecca, for those that don't know you, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi. Well, thanks very much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be able to share my story and help spread the word. Well, my name's Rebecca. I'm 44 years old. I live in Galicia in northern Spain. And I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis back in 2016 when I was 36 years old. And it's been quite a long journey from that point to where we are now. But in a nutshell, I started the carnivore diet a year ago, and I saw a radical upturn in my health when I started it really very quickly. And it's basically all my symptoms have completely disappeared and I am basically back to full health, which is quite astonishing because previously I was completely disabled by my symptoms, particularly fatigue and brain fog. Left me housebound and using a wheelchair and barely able to hold a conversation. So to have my life back has been absolutely astonishing, and I'm very keen to help spread the word ever since.
I'm so glad that you found health and happiness now. That had to be quite a struggle. So, let's rewind a little bit back to 2016, I think you said,
Yeah.
when you were diagnosed. What sort of issues and complications were you having at that time that made you seek help and figure out what's going on?
Well, it was all very sudden. I was in the final year of my PhD. I was living in Manchester in Northern England, and I was about to launch into a high-level career in academia. So I was really fighting fit, very full life and very fast-paced life and a lot of pressure. And the very first thing that happened didn't give me any cause for alarm. But looking back now, the very first thing that happened was that I went for a blood test at my local doctor because I was starting to experience fatigue and sleeping in the middle of the day, which was really unusual for me. I was very, very high energy. So I was concerned enough about that to take myself off for a blood test, and it came back with low vitamin D, which I now know is extremely common with multiple sclerosis. But at the time, I just thought, well, I live in the north of England. I'm studying all day, teaching all day. I'm indoors. I don't know. That's why I've got low vitamin D. That's why I'm tired. End of. But so that would have been in maybe November time. By April, I started getting nausea and dizziness one day, and I thought that I was going down with a virus or something, or adrenal fatigue I found on the internet. I just thought maybe it's my workload, the pressure that I'm under. But what happened was that dizziness settled down into double vision. And I mentioned this to my father, who is a retired GP, a retired doctor. And he knew that double vision could potentially be something very serious. First, they rule out a brain tumor, then they look to rule out MS. So he didn't want to tell me this, but he was sort of trying to nudge me to please go and get this checked out. So I went to an eye hospital, which happened to be opposite the campus where I was studying and teaching. And I went into the A&E and told them I had double vision, and they immediately put me through triage to the most important, the most quickly to be seen. And they did eye tests on me, and they admitted me into hospital that night for a CT scan to check for the brain tumor.
Wow.
I couldn't have been more surprised. I didn't know that the double vision could potentially be so serious. So it was all a bit of a shock to the system. They ruled out the brain tumor that night, thank goodness. But then they said, please stay in for another 5 days and we can give you an MRI scan. And what I didn't know was that they would be checking for demyelination, which is a sign of multiple sclerosis. So that's what happened. I had an MRI scan and it came back with demyelination. So that's the first I heard of multiple sclerosis being in my life. So it was very sudden, and it was to do with the nerve failure in my eye. So what happened was that it's demyelination. So the immune system is attacking the nerve fibers in the brain, the myelin sheathing around the nerve fibers. And so that could actually strike anywhere in your body. But the nerve that it hit was my eye nerve. And that's why I had double vision, because one eye was looking in a slightly different angle to the other. So yeah, it was very sudden, very unexpected, and a symptom that I wouldn't have necessarily known was an emergency. But after that moment, so the diagnostic process actually took about 8 months, because they don't like to diagnose you too quickly because the medication is very expensive, but they want to put you on medication as soon as possible. So they gave me further MRI scans that showed further demyelination activity, and 8 months later, I was diagnosed and I was put on medication. And by this point, I was completely debilitated. So the symptoms set in
Wow.
pretty quickly after my hospital stay. I was struggling to finish my PhD. It was like running across a bridge that's collapsing underneath you. It's
Mm.
the hardest thing I've ever had to do, finish my PhD with MS fatigue. And I had to extend by 6 months in order to get it done. But I did. I handed it in. I'm very proud to say I handed it in. And then after that, I completely crashed, because psychologically that had been something to focus on keeping me going. I mean, really, I was terrified. I didn't know what this would mean for my life, for my career,
Mhm.
for my body. So it was something to focus on. And when I handed it in, I completely crashed. For like 2 years, 3 years, I was isolated and housebound. And
Wow.
yeah, and all the symptoms were starting to hit. You have strange things like balance issues, bladder issues, as well as the fatigue and the aches and the pains. And it's just like being hit by a juggernaut every single day, and it doesn't get any better. You have like a slightly less bad day. um,
Oh my goodness.
Activity on that day, and it just that you get the payback from that. So it's like living in a straitjacket. It was the hardest time of my life, and I didn't think that there was any fixing it because the medication, it was daily injectables, which were actually quite traumatizing because they're extremely painful, not the jab, but the stuff in your body. And I had very little fat on my body because I was following a particular diet for MS, which eliminated all saturated fats, interestingly. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And so I had very little fat on my body, and the diet didn't help me feel better. I mean, it was whole foods, and so it was probably better than my previous diet. So, but it did not return any strength to me or reduce any symptoms. And the medication was just adding like a layer of trauma to what was already going on. And the medication doesn't help with your symptoms either. The point of it is to potentially slow down the course of the disease in the future, but only
Mm.
potentially and only to a certain degree. So it is not a very good trade-off, I didn't think, given the impact it was having on my quality of life and the fact that it wasn't helping with my symptoms. So it all just felt like my entire life had turned into some kind of sick joke.
Wow, that's horrible. I mean, that had to be really scary to go through as well. Like mentally, how were you handling that?
It was really, really hard. Yeah, it was really hard. I was somebody that I'm very, very sociable. I'm very, very talkative. I love being around other people. Um, I was very high energy, and all of a sudden it was the same four walls every day. And it was the fact that, the world doesn't wait around for sick people. That's what I found. And that's widely reported across, many chronically ill people report the same. And it's,
Mm.
being sort of forgotten by my nearest and dearest was the hardest part of it. But at the same time, the physical symptoms were just an ongoing shock. How can this be my bodily experience every single day? Like, it's losing your ability to get up in the morning, carry out activities, make plans is completely disabling. I mean, I had no life. And so I didn't have anything to distract me from the fact that I'd lost most of my friends and family and colleagues. I could have gone out and just taken control of the situation, made new friends, done new activities. But being trapped inside your house, you're just swimming in this pool of negativity all the time. And yeah, I look
Oh,
back on it now and it's hard to believe that that was what was happening. And I believed at the time that that would be the rest of my life. There would be no getting better. I had no idea that I wouldn't have been able to have this conversation that we are having now. So just to be able to sit here and coherently talk,
my goodness.
it,
Wow.
yeah,
That would definitely be very hard to go through every single day
yeah,
feeling that way.
yeah,
So how long did that go on?
yeah. So the official diagnosis was in, let's say, January 2017, and then I started making plans to leave the UK in 2019. So that went on for about 2 years, a good solid 2 years, where I was at my worst. And it's a period of time I don't very clearly remember. I know what happened. But it's just the memories are quite hazy. It doesn't feel real. Um, but what happened was I experienced something very surprising sometime in 2019, which was that I discovered that there was, you see, with MS, you're told there's nothing that people can be done for your symptoms, for your daily symptoms of
Mhm.
brain fog and fatigue. They're just something you have to learn to live with. But I discovered almost by accident, and many people don't like to take this seriously, that a lot of people react against this possibility, but I discovered that I was being affected by Wi-Fi radiation,
Wow.
EMFs. And it wasn't even something that I wasn't even desperately trying to find a cure or a cause or anything like that, but I just came across it and I discovered a huge difference when I went to like in the space of half an hour when I eliminated my exposure and went to a wide connection. So that's something that I don't tend to talk about because it gets such a hostile reaction, but that gave me my first indication that I could control the situation, that what was happening in my body wasn't out of my control completely, and that there were environmental elements. And what I didn't know was that there's also a dietary element. But I so what I did at that moment in time was realize, well, if this is the case, I can't stay in the city. I was living in the second biggest city in England by then. I was in my hometown in Birmingham. Um,
Mhm.
and I thought, well, what I need to do is move to the countryside and move off grid. But in England, that's not really very feasible because of the weather. So I
Right.
thought, well, I'll go to Spain because I'm actually a translator. That's what I do as a profession. And I was losing my ability to I wasn't practicing my French or my Spanish, which are my bread and butter, because I was barely speaking English. I was very fast losing my ability to speak in foreign languages, which was what I needed to be able to try and resurrect my career. So everything pointed to move to Spain. You can live off grid, it's sunnier. You can more easily get freelance translation work should you be well enough to work again, and life will just be better. And I can live off grid. So, but there was a complicating factor, which was Brexit. So I had a deadline to do that. So basically, before I'd really rehabilitated myself, I was suddenly moving countries off grid up a mountain. And
Oh, wow.
yeah. And what was really crazy was that I got to the mountain 2 weeks before the pandemic. So 2 weeks before lockdown, I was up a mountain. I was in the best place possible for the pandemic. So anyway, I spent 4 years on that mountain, and it really did help me to rehabilitate, to get away from all of the stresses, because it wasn't it you know, there's so many toxins in a city environment, and so much it's like an assault on your body on some level being in a city environment every single day.
Certainly.
Just loud noises, traffic, pollution, let alone Wi-Fi and things like that. So it did me a whole load of good being in a different environment, but it didn't really take away. I was still limited because it was more physically demanding living off grid. And so the extra energy that I gained went in the fact that my life was now more logistically difficult. Um,
Right.
so I was still quite restricted and by fatigue, and I wasn't able to start my work life up, and I didn't really have a social life either. I was just in a better environment, and it wasn't until I started the carnivore diet that I immediately got my core strength back and my memory and my ability to concentrate and work. And yeah, it was starting the carnivore diet. So I started that diet a year ago, and I'd been on the mountain 3 or 4 years by that point.
Okay. So that's good that you got away from the hustle and bustle and was able to let your body sort of rest
Yeah,
so that you could start to heal.
yeah, I needed it.
So you're eating a carnivore diet, obviously. So what I found most common with carnivores is they they won't accept their situation, right? Like they're
Mm.
like, okay, there's got to be a way to fix this. So was there ever a point with you that you said that, and how did you actually find the carnivore diet?
Yeah, I really relate to that. It really felt like this cannot be what's happening. It felt wrong on some deep level that this could be what was happening, and maybe that's just denial, but it has led to me taking decisions which have worked. So I think maybe there's some instinct there.
Hmm.
What was the second part of the question?
How did you actually find out about the carnivore diet?
Well, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't desperately looking around for different cures because I'd already done this huge thing of moving up the mountain. And I guess I think what tipped me towards trying the diet was that I'd met somebody, I was in a relationship for the first time in like 10 years because of my illness. And I think I just wanted to be a better person in the relationship because I was very aware of the fact that I wasn't like myself. I wasn't the person I used to be. And I used to be constantly insecure and apologizing for myself. And I think that's probably um, what made me take the leap rather than my multiple sclerosis. But I came across it on YouTube. It was Kelly Hogan. It was an interview with Kelly Hogan. And I was just absolutely struck by it. How incredible. This woman looks so healthy and her story is incredible. So I remember phoning a friend and saying, "Oh my goodness, I've just heard this really crazy thing," but I didn't connect it to autoimmune conditions or illness. I thought it was a more of a weight loss thing. Um,
Hmm.
but YouTube suggests similar topics, doesn't it? Once you've watched one video, and so that's what it did. And so I had like a bit of a drip feed of carnivore videos, and I don't actually remember the video that made me think, "Oh, I'll try it." But it was quite a spontaneous decision, and it was about a year later. So I'd heard of it a year previous, and then I just decided to give it a go, uh, in back in I think it was June 2023. And I think really because I just wanted to, give the relationship the best shot. And I really wasn't that invested in it. I had no clue that this was going to fix my I'd forgotten what it was like to be fully healthy. In some ways, I was comparing myself always with the time when I was at my most ill, and I was
Hmm.
physically stronger than that. But I didn't remember what it was like to be my full self again. And when that returned, I mean, it was core strength on every level, not just physical, but Like, I was mentally tougher, I was emotionally tougher, my anxiety was reduced. I've always had anxiety, I've got a very anxious disposition. So there's a it never goes away, but there's, like, degrees, you know, and
Mm.
I remember just becoming a bit more of a cool cucumber. And being able to deal with stuff, you know, just on a just being able to confront the problems of life and be more resilient, like that type of strength.
Mhm.
But my core strength where I'm able to lift things and go dog walking and uh, just organize my day and be physical, like that's no longer wiping me out like it used to, and I'm able to actually just live a normal life, just get up in the morning, and it was incredible, and it was really in the space of about a month that I was strongly noticing the difference.
That's incredible.
Mm.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm really happy for you.
Thanks.
So I do wanna ask, when you started the carnivore diet, were you still having, basically the same symptoms that you had had for years prior?
Not as bad, no. The worst was when I was still in the UK and before I moved up the mountain. There was some degree of rehabilitation from being in the better environment and moving up the
Mm,
mountain. I mean, probably because I had more vitamin D as well. There's so many factors, and I think that's something that I want to emphasize, that a chronic illness is so complex. There's so many ways in which it impacts your life and so many symptoms, physical, cognitive, psychological, that come into play. And you might have comorbidities, other you might have other conditions that interact with it, with
mhm.
whatever condition you're seeking to cure with carnivore. There might be other conditions at play. So I just think every individual is so complex, and um yeah, I think it some of those factors I had taken control of. So I had seen some improvement, but that in itself just gave me some hope all of a sudden, whereas
Mm,
before I was led to believe there was no hope and that I would just be on pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life. So I think coming off, because I stopped taking Copaxone, which was the injectable that I was on, after a year. I couldn't do it anymore. When I was still in the
mhm.
UK, I just decided one day I'll have a break today, and then that turned into a week, and then I never ever went back. I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And then, I was also on antidepressants back then. I was just on a cocktail of drugs, and I hated it. So when I moved up the mountain, I just was like, "No, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to even register at a doctor." I didn't, for the whole of the pandemic, I wasn't even registered at a doctor, let alone with a neurologist. I had no medical interventions whatsoever during the pandemic, and I'm very, very glad about that. I wasn't even on their radar. Um, but then eventually I had a fatigue relapse a little bit because I got snowed in for a week, and it hit me very hard.
Yeah,
And I decided to sign up to a neurologist. I thought, I should really have a neurologist since I do have multiple sclerosis. Um,
right.
And so I went, and then he started pushing further pharmaceutical, like, actually, it was chemotherapy. He wanted me to start chemotherapy in tablet form, and
Wow.
I've just been refusing that. So, I think, environmentally and psychologically, I was starting to take control again, and I did see some benefits from that. So, I would say that's been part of my health journey, but it's, as I say, it's the carnivore diet that was the most shocking in a good way. And I wonder what my situation would be if I'd started it back in 2017 when I was diagnosed. I do wonder. I
Mhm.
mean, I wouldn't change where I am now. I'm glad to be living in a rural area, and I'm in the perfect situation to rear my own animals for meat. So I'd have more, I can make sure that there's no hormones injected into them or what have you, and they're treated well, and it's more economical. So that's a great situation to be in. But I still do wonder, if I'd managed to retain my career, and if I'd, by starting the carnivore diet in 2017, maybe it would have avoided so much heartache, so much difficulty. Um,
Most Well, I can't say for certain, but I would say more than likely. But, now uh, you're in a position now to help so many people based on what you've gone through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I feel really I for so many years, for nearly a decade, I've been thinking, what is the point of my life now? What hope is there? What I don't my chance to have children's been taken away, my career's been taken away. Like, what meaning is there? And
mhm.
so I've often thought this since I discovered the carnivore diet helped me so much, and I spontaneously started my YouTube channel at the same time. Just I didn't know it was going to have this outcome, obviously, but but now that's been growing, and to feel that I'm part of this community and this mission, it's a mission, has brought meaning back to my life. So obviously the primary outcome that is absolutely amazing is getting my body and brain back. But on top of that, to be part of a community and sort of in a position where I can potentially inspire others to make similar decisions feels so meaningful. So it's given me so much more than even my health.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm.
So you had mentioned your YouTube channel. What is your YouTube channel?
It's called Cabana Chronicles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
So
there a particular reason you chose that name?
well, I used to live on a mountain cabin, a cabana, and
Okay.
also the word chronic has chronic illness, chronicles. I quite like. And
Okay.
initially I started it, just to record off-grid life with a chronic illness, not knowing that I
Mhm.
could ever be cured. Uh, but it was very, very small, for I had, like, 10 subscribers, and they were all people I knew in real life. And then it started to grow when I on my first video, my first carnivore video that started to grow, and I had hoped to kind of represent chronically ill people when I started my channel, but I had no idea that I would be in a position to represent ex chronically ill people.
Right.
What a miracle. It's really unbelievable to think that I don't consider myself to have multiple sclerosis anymore. That like I forget, I as I said earlier, you forget what it's like to be ill. You forget what you adapt very, very quickly. You get used very, very quickly to whatever bodily situation you're in, is what I find. It was hard for me to remember what it was like to be healthy when I was really ill. Then it got hard to remember now what it was like to be ill. It's just, but
Right.
I often kind of have to stop and remember if I'm in a bad mood on a given day, you're in a bad mood because you've got a life. Your life is annoying you because you have one.
Right.
Whereas I didn't have a life.
Yeah, I love that. So I came across your channel, a video that you did with your father,
Oh, yeah.
and I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Mm.
So your father was a general practitioner, medical doctor, and what was his take on all this as you're going through this?
Well, I mean, when I first went down with MS, obviously he was extremely concerned. Um, yeah, as any father would be. So, yeah, I would say that he was, one of my only sources of support, very few sources of support. So he's very well informed about all the details of when I was at my most ill. He was concerned when I moved up the mountain. Uh, um, but as he said to me, actually in the video, in that video I recorded with him, he did say that, he was persuaded by the fact that I did report feeling so much better. Um, but the real point of interest is, what does he think about the carnivore diet? Um, so he said to me on the phone when I first decided to start the diet that he actually didn't think cholesterol was such a problem, and that the body manufactures it for a reason. So he's never really been persuaded by this idea that cholesterol is bad. So he wasn't actually that phased by me starting the diet. But what really persuaded him was seeing the difference. And he testifies to just how, I improved a bit going up the mountain and being in a new environment, but I did not improve this much. And he's on a personal and a medical level, he's a useful person to have around because he knows the difference on a personal level. But also I mean, he's on some level, he's still very much mainstream,
Hmm.
but he will entertain the possibility that there, maybe we don't know everything, or maybe there's other interests at play. He will entertain that possibility. So he's been extremely supportive of the carnivore diet.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an awesome father, one that doesn't have a gigantic ego like some doctors can have.
Absolutely. He's very special in that way, definitely. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, what sort of encounters have you had on your YouTube channel so far that's notable?
Whoa, that's an interesting question. Well, I to be honest, what's notable is how positive all the comments are. I honestly thought I'm gonna get savaged by a whole bunch of vegans putting this content up. I fully expected that, and that's not what's happened. The people who are regular commenters or new commenters on my channel, I find to be really inspiring, and really positive, and the mutual validation of what everybody's going through, both bad and positive with the diet, is really wonderful. Um, but to find that 99% of the comments are people who are echoing my same experience, or maybe
Wow.
not MS, but diabetes, or whatever autoimmune conditions, or people who tell me that they've watched a video and it's inspired them to take the leap. I love it when people say that, and not that I want to tell people what to do, but just the idea that there's a community of people out there that are brave enough to take their health into their own hands and go against what the mainstream says. I feel like I found my tribe, and I think, sort of as a general point, that's what struck me most about my YouTube channel, and the feedback that I get is just, I feel like I'm part of a community now of people who are independent thinkers, who have often gone through very hard times and can relate on a much deeper level to what it's like to lose your health. Because it's such a privilege that you don't know you
Mhm.
have till you lose it. And I found I got very alienated from the healthy people in my life, not because I wanted to be, but because I was kind of left behind. So to feel that you are seen in that situation, and that people are giving you that validation, that the struggle, that how hard that struggle is and how far you've come, is absolutely life-changing. Actually, it's really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've found nothing but positivity in this community.
Mhm.
There's a few that you're like, hmm. But for the 99.9% of everybody that I've come across are absolutely wonderful people,
Yeah,
and yeah, I just love being in this space and talking about these topics and helping people when we can.
yeah.
Um, so let's shift gears real quick. What do you eat in a day?
Okay, well, I'd say my standard day is a full pack of bacon and 4 eggs for breakfast, which is at 11 o'clock, and a coffee. I haven't cut out caffeine yet. That's I'm working on that. But just a black coffee. Um,
Right.
so that I love my breakfast. I think that's my favorite meal. And then in the afternoon, 4 or 5 p.m., either ground beef or ribeyes, a couple of ribeyes. Actually, I bought some lamb the other day. I bought a pack of lamb, and that was really wonderful to just have something a bit different. Um, so that's my standard day. But obviously, there's variations. Like sometimes I might have seafood. Sometimes there may be chicken. Every now and again, I do include some low carb vegetables, avocado, mushrooms, once in a while, but just for a bit of variation. But at the moment, I'm trying to stick to the diet as purely as possible, because I haven't yet had my first MRI scan since I started the diet. And I want to see the difference with the purest form of the diet possible. So that's actually going to be quite soon. That's going to be, and it's been delayed because I moved house from the mountain to Galicia, where I now live. And I don't have private health insurance. So I'm in the system. And so I've had to be reallocated a neurologist in this area where I live. And that appointment has to happen before they can order the MRI. Anyway, it's going to happen fairly soon. And so I do want to stick to the diet as pure and simple as possible until that MRI scan at the very least, if not for longer. But so that's what I tend to eat twice a day, 11 o'clock, 4-pack of bacon, 4 eggs, 4 or 5, just a quantity of beef in whatever form that's it.
Well, that's almost identical to how I eat, except I don't eat as much bacon. I probably I usually eat 9 eggs in the morning for breakfast around
Wow.
11 o'clock. Yeah, and then a pound to 2 pounds of beef in whatever form, usually ribeye or ground beef, at 5 o'clock or so in the afternoon. So yeah, pretty similar.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the scan that's coming up.
Mm.
Have you had any other testing done or anything like that that shows results of, basically the journey that you've been on so far with carnivore?
Yeah, I had a blood test.
Okay.
My previous neurologist did order me a blood test, and uh, everything. I mean, I'm no scientist or medic, or I don't know anything about nutrition either. I'm on a steep learning curve here. I didn't know how to interpret my blood results, to be perfectly honest. But I put it out to my viewers on my channel, and lots of people wrote back saying this is absolutely fine. But my neurologist, I remember he actually wrote in English, "This is bad," against one of my cholesterols, because there's HDL and LDL, isn't there? I can't remember which one it was. He put "This is bad." He wrote
Wow.
on the bit of paper. So um so his interpretation of the results differed from the carnivore community's interpretation of the results. But that's all I've had since starting the diet. And that was quite early on in the diet, actually. So I feel like these results are going to be the most interesting, the most important ones coming up with my new. And I'm very keen to know what my new neurologist is going to say about the diet. My previous neurologist wanted to know nothing about it.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't interested.
So this new scan, is it going to determine if you actually have myelinization now, like if it's returned?
Yeah, demyelination. Yeah, it's so I had 14 lesions on my last scan, which was, I guess it's coming up to 2 years ago now, because it was, or a year and a half ago. Yeah, because I remember discussing the results of that scan after I went carnivore, because I posted a video about it. But the
Okay.
scan itself was done before I started the diet. There was just a delay in the follow-up appointment.
Mhm.
And so in that scan, so that would have been maybe 6 months before I started the diet, that scan was done, and I had 14 lesions on my brain. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Or we so
Yeah. So,
know if they've reduced or what.
right. Well, I think you're going to have good news.
I hope
And
so.
I think it's pretty interesting too. Doctors react to blood work with the cholesterol. Like you probably feel like you've had 100 things that have improved in your health and your life, but this one number on a piece of paper is like somehow what
Yeah.
you're doing is not correct.
Yeah,
It just blows my mind.
there's hysteria over it.
Right.
Rest, but myelin is made of cholesterol. Myelin, as in demyelination. What the brain is, it needs cholesterol to repair the damage that the immune system does to the myelin sheathing. It needs it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's we're going to educate them one way or another. Ground up grassroots effort for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you let's say there's somebody out there that's watching this video and they have MS, or maybe they have symptoms of MS but haven't been diagnosed,
Mm.
what sort of suggestions would you have for that person?
Don't panic, because this is not the death sentence that it might appear to be. There are things you can do to take control of the situation. That's what I found. That's what many other people have found. So I would always suggest doing the diet. But I also feel like I don't have the right to make decisions for people. The whole point of my message is we should have autonomy over our own bodies and be able to have access to all the information and make our own choices. But I think, I mean, there's many things I'd say. I'd love to be in a room with somebody in that situation and have a long, long conversation. I suppose what I would say is don't freak out. You can take control of your health and don't believe everything you're told by experts. You're free to believe it if you wish, but don't necessarily believe that there's no other way. I would say that.
Speaking about your YouTube channel, where do you see the future of that going?
Oh, well, I suppose I'm kind of trying to move into the homesteading space a little bit because that's what
Okay.
I'm now doing. I now live on a farm in Galicia. I mean, it's not a running farm yet. It needs renovation, and I don't have all the animals yet. Any of the animals actually. I just got the chickens so far. Um, but that's I'm I would love to you know do more content about homesteading, but I find that content doesn't actually do so well. And I think in terms of the carnivore diet, I'm very keen to continue spreading the word because it's so important. I, there's little of more importance, if you ask me. So I think what I would like to do is just do some more research because, okay, I have a PhD, but I'm no scientist. I don't know anything about nutrition. I was in the humanities. So all I can do is, tell a nice story. But I don't have any real scientific knowledge. I have a case. I am a piece of evidence, not proof, but evidence. I'm a piece of anecdotal evidence. And I would like to bolster that with more knowledge and continue this learning curve that I've been on. So I'd like to move into the homesteading space, but also to improve my carnivore content by becoming more knowledgeable about the science of it, particularly.
Yeah, I love that. And basically your newfound knowledge with paired with your PhD, I think is going to be a recipe for some killer content. And I
Oh,
can't wait
thank
for
you.
that.
I hope so. Hope so.
So you said you're in Spain now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're filming a documentary called Healing Humanity, and there's a lady that had Parkinson's that is part of our documentary.
Okay.
And she healed her Parkinson's, believe it or not. She
Wow.
was medically diagnosed with Parkinson's, and now the diagnosis was removed after eating a carnivore diet, which sounds incredibly insane. We verified medical records and things like that, so
Wow.
it is indeed true. But she also had a stroke, and the symptoms from that are drastically improved as far as weak left side of her body, and she's 60. I can't remember exactly her age, but she's in her 60s, and she is actively training to do a 500-mile hike in Spain.
Oh my
And yeah, and it's the St. Francis of Assisi Trail. So I don't know if you've heard of that or close to that.
well, everyone does the Camino de Santiago, which goes right by my house. I'm
Okay.
not heard of the Francis of Assisi one, but it might be. There's many trails connected to the Camino de Santiago. Um, that's
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah. So we went and filmed her at her home, and she does this workout where she climbs this expansion bridge. And she's like, well, you're supposed to do high intensity for 20 seconds and then rest for 10 seconds,
Oh,
then high intensity for 20 seconds and then rest for 10 seconds.
okay.
And she's like, well, I don't really do the rest. I just walk. Right. And this, this lady's in her 60s,
That's incredible.
and Carrie and I were trying to follow along to film her. And I'm telling you what, that's probably the most strenuous thing that I ever did in my
Couldn't keep
life,
up.
to try to follow along and keep up with her.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible that
So,
she had her diagnosis removed. I would love that. I would love to have my diagnosis removed because then I could afford private health insurance.
right.
Things, and I wouldn't have to have my driving license renewed every 3 years, things like that. Have to go to your But wow, to be have your so did they say that they had misdiagnosed her, or did they just remove it? You don't have it anymore. Is that what?
Yeah, they removed the diagnosis. They never said that they had misdiagnosed. And that was a big thing for us too. You know, we wanted to make certain that the diagnosis was actually like a true, coded diagnosis for Parkinson's, and it was. So
Wow.
the power of a proper human diet.
I mean, it feels like a miracle, but it's just so natural.
Right?
It's just so natural. And I look at my dogs all the time and I think, they go crazy when I cook a ribeye. They know it's the right food for them. They absolutely that is my dog will eat anything and she's really, really greedy, but what she really wants is meat, and I mean,
Absolutely.
we're not dogs, but, I think the same applies to us. I think we know on some deep level, this is what we're supposed to eat. This is what's filling. This is what's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. If it was a choice between, if you smelled a plate of lettuce or you smelled a ribeye,
Yeah,
I'm going for the ribeye every time.
yeah. And if you
Absolutely.
do the diet properly, if you do your follow the fasting schedules, then it doesn't get boring. So I did a recent video where I talked about 5 things I hate about the diet. Um, and I talked about how it sometimes gets boring but really, if you're doing it properly, if you're waiting until you're actually hungry until you eat, you always are happy to eat a big pile of beef.
Yep.
You're truly hungry and not just craving sugar and, looking to snack. If you're actually hungry in your stomach because you've eaten and then allowed it to digest and now you're hungry again, that's never going to be unwelcome, that plate of ribeye. And then the freedom it gives you in terms of just on if you having your health returned to you is obviously freedom, but just in terms of not having to worry about ingredients and buying this and that and all that, just one simple piece of beef, put it in a frying pan.
Right.
No, it's so simple. You don't have to think about food. You have a completely new relationship with food where it's nutrition, but it's delicious. But it serves a purpose fundamentally, which frees you up to live the rest of your life to its best potential.
Yeah, for sure. So, before we wrap this up, is there anything that maybe we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about or shout out or?
Yeah, probably this is gonna be one of the things where I go, "Oh, I should have said this 5 minutes later." Maybe it's bringing up a whole new topic, but I just also want to say that I was able to quit marijuana because of the carnivore diet. So I had been smoking marijuana medicinally for many, many years, and it had become a habit, and I'd maybe become to some degree dependent on it. And
Mhm.
the carnivore diet enabled me to kick the habit. And that's the reason for that is that I had such energy back that I realized that this now was only whereas it used to be medicinal and it used to help me feel halfway normal because I had symptoms of MS. Now
Mhm.
it was just depressing my energy and stopping me from living my life, after I'd had my life taken away for so many years. So I didn't want that. I wanted to go out and live my life. So I've quit marijuana, and only the carnivore diet has enabled me to do that. And then that in itself has reduced sugar cravings because obviously having a marijuana habit, you get the munchies and you get sugar.
Right.
It's then all of this is still part of a journey towards better health because that's quitting the marijuana means that I'm much more aware of my caffeine habit because I'm now finding it hard to get to sleep because the marijuana would help me get to sleep, and that would mean I could drink more caffeine, and now that's out of balance. So I feel like the diet it sets you on a healing journey, but there's so many other aspects. But I find that I'm looking towards all those aspects with optimism and enjoyment. Maybe I'll start meditating. Maybe I'll quit caffeine. Just fine tuning the situation. So yeah, I just want to say that there are many, many factors with a chronic illness, and maybe carnivore isn't the only one, but I think that you can't begin to address chronic illness unless you address diet. And I've come to be persuaded that the carnivore diet is the appropriate human diet. And then once you've adopted that diet, there's more healing to be done. But that's now in a situation, you're in a position of power to be able to do that.
I love that. A position of power.
Mm.
That's awesome. Very cool. So, Rebecca, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast today and chatting. And I look forward to potentially connecting again once you receive those results of that scan to
Yeah,
see what we got going on.
for
So,
sure.
thank you so much for being here. You're no doubt going to be an inspiration to others with MS and have chronic illness and what they can do to take back control of their health and be the captain of their own ship. So thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you.